Thank you everyone for joining. We'll give everyone another minute and we'll start the webinar. Thank you.
Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining our webinar today. My name is Tony, I manage VOQUZ Labs APAC and Middle East regions, and today we're going to be talking about the benefits of outsourcing your SAP license management. I'm very pleased to be joined by Joanna. So Joanna, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, yes, I'm Joanna, thank you Tony, hello as well. I'm part of VOQUZ Labs delivery team, so which means in our company, I'm part of the team that delivers our product, MQ, customizes it, and basically makes all the reports available that we'll need to have an overview of the licensing situations.
Thank you. And just to let a little bit of background about myself before I go into the topic, I've been in software licensing for a quarter of a century, dear oh dear oh dear, and SAP specific for the last 15 years. So I'm hoping we can give you some useful information today. So why are we talking about this particular subject? In simple terms, SAP licensing is difficult. It's a complex. There's lots and lots of different metrics. There's lots of different elements to using SAP licensing that it's very difficult to keep a grasp of. Unless you live and breathe SAP licensing, which for our students, Joanna and I do, it's difficult, as I say, to keep on top. So there's also the added complexity that in a large number of cases, SAP doesn't share the price list with people. They change the metrics, they change the license definitions. And so it's very, very tricky for a bystander, if you like, or for someone who only does this as a hobby to keep on top of everything that's happening. So this slide that we're looking at here just gives an element of some of the factors that come into play. So there's the named users I mentioned, lots and lots and lots of definitions.
Tony, if I may add, you also said the people that do it as a hobby, but also people need to keep in mind that most people that most SAP customers that interact with licensing topics do it once a year or once every 2 years. And part of the team who does this or deals with it is the part of the SAP basis team, licensing manager. So my experience is that a lot of customers hear a lot of keywords coming from SAP or in the licensing areas. But they don't necessarily understand if it's applying or it's applicable to their landscape, if it's something that's relevant for them in the future, and how they can make sense of it. So it can be a very confusing topic for a lot of customers that would require a lot of time for them to feel comfortable.
Absolutely. And it's not as if SAP licenses are cheap. So if you misunderstand something with the best will in the world, these errors or misunderstandings can make an enormous difference to the amount of money that you're paying to SAP. And of course, your ongoing maintenance costs after that as well. The HANA database, runtime or enterprise, even that simple question can have significant impact on your costs and your compliance status. So the indirect use situation, so digital access or the legacy named user licensing model, another very complex topic, which if you don't get it spot on, has the potential to have massive licensing implications for you as well. So just a number of different elements that all come into play, and you need to try to balance and understand them all to make an effect, or to get your SAP licensing as we use the word optimized a lot, but as optimized and cost effective as you possibly can. Don't just take our word for it. We have been working with many, many customers across the world in all sorts of verticals, all sorts of industries. I'm not gonna read through this for obvious reasons. But VOQUZ Labs has been working with customers for many, many years in doing exactly what we're talking about today. For those of you who've joined our webinars before and who know VOQUZ Labs, you will have heard of SAMQ. SAMQ is our proprietary SAP license optimization tooling. It's an SAP add-on. It's very easy to install in your SAP systems, and it builds the platform to measure and optimize your SAP licensing. Care Plus is our managed service concept. So it's an ongoing relationship with customers to make sure that they get the best out of SAMQ, of course, but also that they get ongoing advice, ongoing license optimization, always make sure that their environment is up to date as it possibly can be. This is a reflection. This is based on our own data. So as I said, we've worked with many customers worldwide. Based on our experience and our data, it's very, very rare for a customer to be accurately licensed. Some of them are under licensed, which means that they owe money to SAP. Many of them are over licensed as well, which means that they're paying too much to SAP, or they have paid too much and they are paying too much on their annual maintenance. So there's millions and millions of dollars or euro, according to this slide, at play here. It's not an insignificant, oh, who cares if we get it right or wrong conversation. It's a conversation that has very significant cost implications for your business, very significant cost implications for your IT department. And of course, people's reputations are built on the accuracy and just the overall efficiency of their SAP and their licensing estate. It's very important that your CIOs, your IT managers, your SAM heads all have a very, very good understanding of the SAP environment.
If I would like to add here something, just to be very clear, that it's not just a question of being over licensed and under licensed. It's also how you assign those licenses. And that's where a tool would be very helpful, of course, is it happens, and this is what we see very often, that customers might have sufficient licenses to cover all their users, but they don't assign it to the proper people or to the proper users. So they have sufficient, but not used properly. So this is also something that might be a compliance issue should the customers be audited, or if there would be a detailed analysis, this might come up or not. It depends on the situation, but it's also something to keep in mind. There might be other issues in the landscape that you wouldn't necessarily notice unless you actually look for them or you know where to look.
Know where to look, I think, is a fantastic point. And of course, the effort in finding that information, that's a very significant factor at play as well. And not only that, but once you've identified whether you're under licensed, you're over licensed, it's what do you do with that information? How can you leverage that information when in your dealings with SAP? That's another very important part. So how do we work with customers? Okay, so let's assume that you've purchased SAMQ, that you've got it installed in your system. These are the types of services that you can expect during your initial engagement with SAMQ. So obviously we look at your contract. We look at your utilization, your use rights. We do this optimization that Joanna mentioned to make sure that every user has the right license based on what they actually need, not SAP's interpretation or someone else's subjective opinion, but an objective definition and classification based on their real usage requirements. And one of the things that we go through in even this annual initial offering is we look at the reports that you would show to SAP if in the annual audit situation. We do some very careful mapping. We make sure, as I say, this word optimized again, that the entire environment is up to date. But then, of course, it's the clarity and the visibility that this gives you. So when you submit information to SAP, when you go through this annual audit process, and every customer does, you can be assured that you have the SAP environment completely up to date and that you know exactly what you're going to be giving to SAP. Now, that might mean, of course, that you're still under licensed, but at least you can budget for it. At least you can have the conversation internally, or we help customers mitigate that risk if it's appropriate or as appropriate as possible. So this slide gives you an understanding. So I'll talk about the top bit. I've got lots of experience in SAP audits, so I know how painful that this can be. So without tooling, you have to basically do it all manually. So you have to have some form of process in place to do the classifications of your users. You need to hope that classification is accurate. You need your basis team to align with your procurement or your contracts team to try to get that up to date. You have to run your SMM yourself. You have to do the consolidation yourself. You have to do the checking yourself, and then you send it off to SAP, and sort of hope that you've got it right. So on the right-hand side of this slide, we try to give you an indication of the benefits of working with SAMQ and tooling. Joanna, maybe you can talk to that a little bit more.
Sure. So we're going to give you a few examples later on how the SAMQ report would look, so you'll understand a little bit better. But the idea is also with the services on the previous slide that we do provide when the tool is installed is, of course, customizing the tool to understand your landscape, to configure the licenses that are available in the bill of material for each customer's individually, and the tool is able to assign the licenses in the target system, so which effectively means that the tool is taking the executed transactions in consideration when identifying a license type for each of them, and if configured, and also assign that optimal license to the users in the target system. So it prepares customers for a measurement with it ensures that it's not just measuring the licenses assigned to the user in the system, but the license is assigned, it's actually reviewed by the tool with this automated process and assigning an optimal license to the users. Before we do prepare for a measurement, we also look if there's any potential of alternative license types or any other options that we'll need to review to reduce possibly the license counts, like identifying inactive users that could be deactivated to reduce costs as well. So with the tool, you'd also save on time, of course, to review users before or review the results before a measurement.
Absolutely. And again, we keep on coming back to that time saving as well. So it's not just about the license cost, it's also about the internal costs, and that's basically the cost of managing the environment. I think that's a crucial point.
Yes.
So that's the first one. So you install SAMQ and you get all of these benefits right up front. But of course, most customers, some customers, just a one-off engagement is fine. They want to understand, they want to be visible, and they want to do a negotiation with SAP, and a one-off implementation is fine for them. But most customers want the idea of having an ongoing management of their SAP estate. They don't want to come back in 2 or 3 years' time and find that it's a mess again and they have to go through the whole process again. What they like is the idea that on an ongoing basis, they know, not hope, but they know that everything in their SAP licensing environment is fully visible. So with our Care Plus offering, we do everything that's listed here. So we do everything, of course, that was in the first one, but we have proactive engagements with customers around their licensing, around changes in their business, around SAP's changing licensing rules, around any major impact in architecture or in business or anything that happens within the organization. We can keep on top of it and we can work with the customers to make sure that at any given stage in the year, not just at the audit time, but at any given stage, someone whoever needs the information can literally get this information virtually immediately. That's our goal with Care Plus, to make sure that this information is available all the time. And I think Joanna mentioned, but SAMQ is capable of doing an ongoing update of the system as well. So you don't just get the information and then your basis team has to run away and update it themselves. SAMQ is capable and has the inbuilt functionality to automatically update your licenses on an ongoing fashion.
And as you said, a lot of customers, of course, want to stay on top of it, but also ahead of it. It's also one reason why they're interested in their current licensing situation, not just during a measurement, is also to plan ahead, to budget ahead, to understand what the future brings to them, how they will need to plan their landscape, their budgets, their everything, their time around it. So it's also a good reason to have an overview.
Absolutely. And one thing that we'll come to in a couple of slides, of course, is the move from ECC to S/4HANA. How do you plan for that? So SAMQ also has the functionality to do mapping from your ECC world into your S/4HANA world. And we won't talk about it today, but it also has the capability of mapping into the FUE or RISE with SAP world as well. So there's lots of functionality. We're only skimming the surface today about what SAMQ will do. Joanna will talk in a few minutes a little bit more detail. But the bottom line is we want to make sure that customers are in a position to manage their licensing for themselves. You don't have to rely on SAP telling you what you need to buy and how much you should spend and what licenses you should have. It's all about being in control of your environment and leveraging that. If you've already spent too much, making sure you get future value from that. You may not be able to give the licenses back, but making sure that you leverage that in any future negotiation. If you're under licensed, it's making sure that you're prepared and making sure that you buy the licenses that you need, not the licenses that SAP tells you need. So there's, again, multiple aspects to this. And we obviously believe that having a professionally, and that's not to say that customers are unprofessional, but having an experienced SAP license management team working with you helps solve a lot of these problems. And as this slide says, also removes a lot of time and effort from managing your SAP environment as well. Mm-hmm. Anything to add on this one, Joanna, before we go into SAMQ?
No, just saying that being proactive and being in control, using a tool like SAMQ is basically a tool to put you in control. So that's the purpose of the tool, to give you the information, the reports, or the overview that you need to feel in control and be in control.
Exactly. So the SAMQ gives you the information, and then using the Care Plus service and our advisory team gives you the expertise to be able to use the information, both internally and also in negotiations with SAP.
Right. So here we have, speaking about the tool, this is an overview of an example report that we have with SAMQ that the tool generates, focusing on named user licenses. So I'll explain just a little bit the columns that we have and then roughly what it means. We don't need to pay attention at each of the line, of course, but just to have a rough idea. We have the licenses. We configure in the tool the inventory of each customer. So you'd have there on the second column the purchase licenses, and then the licenses in the currently in the system. The second column, the third column with blue background in there is showing you what licenses are in the system, configured in the systems, what SAP would be able to identify if you were doing a measurement right now. And then a bit on the right side, the other column in blue background, optimized configuration based on the tool. That's going to show the licenses that the tool would recommend or would assign to the users based on the rules we have in place, based on the actual transactions the users have executed. You'd see there, for example, configured in the systems would be 295 users, but SAMQ would recommend only 189 users in that category. And again, you might have sufficient licenses, you might be over licensed or under licensed, but there's also a question of who do you assign those licenses to? Because somebody joining a company as an intern and staying within the company for the next 10 years will have definitely a lot of different roles and responsibilities and different types of transactions execute throughout his stay. So the license they would also need to change. So one other thing, or a few other things that we'd like to mention here, or I would like to mention here, is that the tool is also able to configure custom license types. So if some customers do have custom license type, we can create profiles for any sorts of license. In addition to that, the tool also has a functionality to identify inactive users. So as many of you might know, users that are expired are out of scope for the measurement. So the aim is to always identify users who haven't logged on for a longer period or don't need their account. and ideally also deactivate them, so they would be out of scope for the measurement and the licenses would be freed up. This is also, of course, something that the tool can do. And it's important to keep an overview, not just from a licensing point of view, but also from a security point of view, to know to deactivate basically users that don't need an account. We have one more slide with a similar report, SAMQ report. However, this one is focusing on the S4 simulation. So using the tool, the report looks similar. It's just that in the optimized column, you'll see the licenses shifted down to the S4 licenses, the S4 HANA developer, professional, functional, and productivity use. So what we can do with the tool is simulate your licensing needs based on an S4 contract, or as Tony mentioned, RISE, so with FUEs. We would look at the transactions the users have executed in the landscape so far, and we'd basically translate that into S4 definitions, and the tool would be able to suggest or assign an S4 license to the users based on their current activity in the system. We do this as simulations, but also, of course, we do have customers that have S4 contracts or RISE contracts already, and for them, it's a productive configuration.
Exactly. Thank you. Thank you. So let's just do a very quick overview. We haven't gone into a huge amount of detail today, but I hope that we've given you some indication, something to think about why you might want to use an external party to manage your SAP licensing. Not because your internal teams don't know what they're doing. It's very often internal teams are very good, very often. But as Joanna said, internally, you probably deal with SAP licenses once a year, once every 2 years, possibly once every 5 years. Organizations such as VOQUZ Labs deal with SAP licensing all day, every day. So what do we bring, or what do we like to think we bring? We bring the ongoing comfort that you're always on top of your SAP licensing, that you always have the right licenses assigned to the right people at the right cost level, that you have full visibility of any costs that might be arising in the future, because there's nothing worse than unbudgeted costs. We all know that you can pay an awful lot with your licenses with SAP, but they also have many, many lower license types as well. So making sure that your future purchases are at the right level is also incredibly important. And also the thing that we've mentioned a few times about the internal time saving, that your basis team, your security team, your whoever team, that is removed from them to a very, very large extent when you have this type of service. But yeah, so that's where we'll leave it for today. If you have any questions, there's a Q&A session coming up immediately after this. If you've put any questions in the chat, we'll address them there as well. So from my side, it's bye-bye. I'll see you next time. And from Joanna?
Looking forward to the questions. Absolutely. And thank you for listening, of course.
Thanks to everyone for coming. I will see you next time.
Hello, everyone. So questions and answers, I hope you can all still hear me.
We can hear you just fine, and I'm not sure, Joanna, this is Stefan, hi. I'm not quite sure if you can read the emails coming in live. I've got one question which is straight on point, which I think is good to be answered here. It says, I'll read it out. I understand the theory, but how can I actually see whether SAMQ really works before I even consider it? I think that's quite legitimate. Can you tell us something about that?
Sure. So how to figure out if SAMQ actually works. So we do have what we call a quick license assessment. That's basically a small type of project where the tool gets installed with a bit of a limitation. So we like to limit this in terms of time. I like to focus and try to finish in a few weeks, basically to connect some productive systems to the tool, optimize them, identify, check the activity of the users, configure the licenses the customer has, and then see what the tool comes up with. If there's any optimization potential, we use it also very often to simulate like S4 or RISE for customers. Ideally, I would recommend that, as you said, for customers that want to see how the tool works, but don't want to commit to a full license, of course, without seeing it first. And also, it would make sense if you had maybe a very difficult licensing situation or custom license types that you maybe had difficulties in the past handling them, to see how the tool would be able to do that if the tool has all the functionalities that you are looking for. So that would be a good way to do it via this quick license assessment that we offer. And as far as I'm aware, it costs about 3,900 euros.
Let me actually just share my browser live.
4,000 euros. I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah, it's 3,900. Okay. So everybody who wants to look it up here, I'm just sharing my browser live. And if you're interested in this and want to check it out beforehand, you simply go to products and to SAPQ, and you see the product sheet here, what SAPQ can do, and what you've been sort of explained by Tony and by Joanna so far. And if you scroll down, doing this live, so I hope everybody can see this okay. You see the quick license assessment, what it can do, what's included there, and then you can actually decide for yourself whether it works. This basically covers the technical fees, so it's more for you to see what you can do and how much you can achieve than for us to test it on your system. That's how I would see it.
So the point is also that you get the actual tool. It's just a license that's different. And the point is, if you do decide after the quick license assessment to keep the tool or to buy the tool, we'd spend some more time to finish the configuration and set it productively, basically, so that we enable it to update the licenses in the target systems, and then you're basically good to go.
So this is not a theoretical demo or something. This is already something people have use of. Okay, brilliant.
Yes, exactly. And it would be with your user. So instead of just having a demo on our system to show you the possible functionalities of the tool, it would be with your actual users and optimizing the licenses in your landscape. Okay.
Okay. Can you see the chat questions there as well? Should I read them out for you? Is that good for you to read out?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
I can look through them.
Ahead.
Okay, so let's see. How are the various MQ options priced? There's one question there. So the pricing is based on a number of systems that get connected to the tool and on the number of users the tool is optimizing. The tool itself, I mean, there's one price for the tool, not depending on the functions or features that are used. So the pricing is based on a number of users and the systems connected. Right, and there's a price for buying the perpetual license to the tool, or as far as I'm aware, there's also different prices for if you want to buy a license for a year or 3 years or so on.
Yeah, that's a good general answer. So if everybody wants an individual one, please feel free to contact us directly via labs@voquuzlabs.com, or simply hit the website and get in contact, and we will get an individual offer for that. But thanks for clearing that up, Joanna. I'm gonna go to the next one.
Okay, so there's one more comment I would like to say regarding the QLA that I didn't mention earlier, the quick license assessment. It's that it's also useful to do a simulation during a quick license assessment if you are currently on an ECC contract, to simulate maybe RISE or S4, and not just to rely on maybe STAR, which is what SAP likes using in the last period, recommending customers to run the STAR report and to consider those licenses as what they would need during a conversion. This would be an alternative. We would simulate also the S4 licenses based on the usage of the user. So it would be also something that customers are lately interested in. Okay, let's go back to the questions and see what there's. Okay. Do you also cover licenses on cloud services offered by SAP? So the tool currently is not optimizing cloud solutions from SAP. Named user licenses for SAP ABAP systems, engines, these kinds of metrics, but cloud services are on our roadmap. Currently not, but we do have what Tony mentioned as a part of the Care Plus is basically our advisory services, our licensed consultants that have a lot of experience with all kinds of SAP related licenses, including cloud solutions. So we do offer services in that area as well. Okay, let's see. There's one question asking about, so we had a slide regarding our customers, but there's one question regarding the geography. So where do our customers come from? Okay, so we do have customers all over the world, including in Africa. We do have offices in Mexico City, the US, in Singapore, and also we have colleagues working out of South Africa. So we do have customers all over the world. We do cover a lot of languages and time zones, and we do indeed have customers on all continents, except maybe
I'll add something to the pricing, if you allow, Joanna, because there seems to be a calculation mistake in here. So it's 3,500 euro and 3,900 US dollars. So just to clear that up. Thanks for the info on that, Sebastian.
Thank you for clarifying. One more question regarding accreditation, SAP accreditation. No, we don't need SAP accreditation to use the tool. So the tool is an add-on. Basically, there's a lot of add-ons in the SAP world, and so is SAMQ. It's developed in our own custom namespace. So you are able to install it and use it in one system of your landscape, and then the tool pulls the data from all the measurement relevant systems in your landscape to identify the relevant information for licensing. And then one more question regarding digital access. We'd also find that I could be falling short of digital access licenses. Okay, so and there's one more I'll read after, or indirect licenses, especially SAP systems connected to cloud service providers. Okay, so the tool has functionalities related to digital access. Basically, the tool can count the documents created by system, service, and communication users in the target systems, similar to what SAP's estimation node would do. Basically, the documents that were created during the past years, created by system, service, and communication users, as I said, non-dialogue users, which generally could fall in the digital access category, but as the name estimation says, it's not necessarily an indicator of how many documents you would actually have in a digital access you would need to pay for in this model. So you would need to understand who are those users creating the documents, how they're being created. Not all documents created by technical users are relevant. Some are simply SAP to SAP communication, so that wouldn't fall in that category. But yes, the tool does have functionalities to identify the risk and also the passport. So once the SAP is automatically able, or via the system measurement, able to count the digital access relevant documents, our tool also has a functionality to go deeper in there to identify the users creating those relevant, actually relevant documents, and go deeper into the monthly documents that were created per month, per year, current year, and so on. So yeah, we do have that. Let's see, does SAMQ require digital licenses to read SAP data? No, the tool is an add-on in one of your systems, so it's not digital access. The tool does not create documents. It's just reading data from, let's say, the productive systems in your landscape, and usually most customers choose to install it in their solution manager. That's where the reports get generated and the analysis takes place, but it doesn't create any documents that would be relevant or that would have any connection with digital access, so there's no risk there. Okay, let's see if there's any more questions.
That was actually pretty lively, if you ask me.
I'm not sure if I missed any. You can tell me if I did, but
yeah, it's a question about calling out the added value of simulating FUEs in SAMQ. as opposed to just adopting the star service to SAP without resorting to a SAM tool like SAMQ.
Yeah, I think I mentioned
Yeah,
that it's another set of data, yeah, that you'd have to find a balance. I mean, generally SAP obviously has that report, but you maybe want to have a different opinion or another tool showing you based on the usage. Star is based on the authorizations, so usually that's helpful to have that. Yeah, we also have, there's one more question. Yes, we definitely do offer training as well. So maybe just as a little bit of a background, when we do have projects or installations of SAMQ, some customers choose to give us access and for us to do the configuration, but during quick license assessments, and we do like to have customers in the sessions with us when we do the configuration. We prefer to have these kinds of remote calls so that we also explain the process and how the tool works, and also train the people to work with the tool so that they, if they don't choose to go with the Care Plus, then of course customers should feel comfortable using the tool and comfortable with the results of the tool. So trainings and explaining the configuration that we do and the choices we make are definitely important.
I'd even add that that's where advisory comes in place in terms of not throwing just throwing a tool at the people and leaving them with it, but actually advising them how to get the most out of it. So this is basically a tailor-made solution on how to use everything and make it work properly for yourself and your individual situation.
Okay, we have two more questions.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, there's still coming questions. I like this. So, does the tool specify the reason to shift one's license from lower level to higher level? It does, but it's not just simply showing you a pop-up saying this is why this user gets a higher license, because you need to keep in mind there's, let's say a user has access to, you have 20 systems in your landscape and a user has access to 5 or 6 productive systems. There's not going to be one specific transaction or a specific thing that user that upgraded the user to a higher license. Maybe it is one thing, but usually it's a combination of activity or transactions or patterns that the user has. We do have an option in the reports to verify a user and then check which transactions or activities were the cause for a specific license being assigned. But we haven't spoken about this, of course, because this webinar was a bit light on the technical side, but the tool does take in consideration the historic activity of transactions of the users. So yeah, it might be 6 months ago or 3 months ago that the user executed a transaction, or some transactions that would cause him to receive a specific license. Okay. Is the tool only for SAP or also available for other ERP systems? Our focus is SAP, so our company does SAP licensing. This is our core area. So the tool is for SAP licensing. SAP app-based systems is what the tool is optimizing. We do offer services and consulting on SAP licensing, covering basically everything that has to do with SAP licensing, but not other ERP systems. Where can we install SAMQ again? Yeah, so we do, most of our customers, not to recommend it, most of our customers install SAMQ in the solution manager, and we would create RFC connections to all the measurement relevant systems in the landscape. But we don't have that as a criteria or a requirement. It's usually the choice of the customer. We do have a requirement, I believe, is NetWeaver version 7.02 or higher for the system where the tool is installed. For the target systems, we don't have requirements in terms of versions. The tool is compatible with R3 systems and S4 systems and everything in between. One more question.
Good that you're here.
Yeah. So does it work out if it's better to go to the classic licensing versus converting to digital licensing? So it's not a tool that would make this recommendation. It would be mostly our advisory services, our colleagues like Tony, that would look at the data produced by the tool and recommend what's better for the future. So the tool would count the documents and give you an overview over the totals or the costs in one model, but there's usually a lot of aspects or some additional aspects that would need to be kept in mind or considered when making a plan or making such a big decision as converting or not converting or adopting a specific model. That's unfortunately not something that the tool can do alone. It would require also some a person behind it. So let's see, 2 more. Okay, so suppose we execute a pro license transaction code once a year. 11 months ago, as an example, will affect licensing category requirement. So when it comes to licensing, the regular process is USMM reads the license assigned to the users in the target systems. But with the tool takes in consideration the historic activity of the user, and that would be also relevant when, in case of an audit or in case of somebody digging it deeper. It's not just what license you have currently. So yes, the tool takes in consideration the historic activity of the users. We have a setting where we can choose how much we want to take in place. The default is 6 months, but we do have a lot of customers or some customers that choose to take the past 12 months in consideration. Now, keep in mind, there are occasionally differences in the activities that the users have, maybe during the closure of the fiscal year, maybe during, I don't know, periodic, those yearly employee reviews, who knows? There's occasionally differences in the user's activity, but most cases, the users execute the same transactions every week or every day or every month. There's not much variation. But yes, in some exceptions, there might be a user that executed a professional transaction, like a finance transaction 11 months ago, and not since, which means the tool will downgrade the user to a lower license as soon as the transaction is not relevant anymore. And that depends on the threshold we configure, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, depends on the configuration and the choice of we might have during the setup or the customer has. Frequency of execution of the code. I'm assuming if that's relevant to select license type. No. So frequency of execution, there's a lot of things to be said there, if it's relevant or not relevant. Generally speaking, if the user executed that, we consider it relevant, because I mean, if you open a transaction during the morning and you save, I don't know, 300 documents during that day, you still did the activity. It doesn't matter how often you open it through the day. Close the window, open it again. So it's not necessarily the frequency, but if you did access it. And yeah, so it's important if one access it. But again, it would be extremely rare to see somebody by mistake access a transaction. And again, we do take in consideration some of the historic transactions. So these are just really outliers. So there's one question, if there's a demo access I can view. So no, we don't have, don't give access to our demo systems to anybody from outside. We do occasionally have demos in our system for interested customers, but generally speaking, we like to use the quick license assessment as a more in-depth demo with the customer's own data, where it actually does make sense for somebody to see their potential there and how the tool works in their system and not in our test environment or demo system.
That actually makes sense, because that's an outcome of the past projects we had, where people were having so many in-depth questions about their own system that it made more sense to test it on the actual data for them to see what it really does, other than just showing people around the tool. So I think that's a legitimate question, but we solved it differently.
Okay, so there's a few more questions related to costs. I think we can reach out separately to discuss in more detail, but generally speaking, we have like a perpetual license of the tool, and there's a maintenance fee, or the tool can be bought for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or for perpetually. It's not a monthly thing, but we can speak about this, I think, more detail with the person who was asking. Right, so that's regards to the costs, but with regards to the tool, we do put out maybe 2, 3 times, 4 times during the year upgrades of the tool, new versions of the tool. Bigger ones, maybe once or twice a year, but also occasionally once in between. They don't always need to be updated. The tool is quite stable. So maybe if you want to benefit from the newest features, if there's anything you're interested in the licensing, sure, a new version of the tool would be installed with the transport in the central system. But generally speaking, we set up jobs with the tool so that it runs by itself throughout the year. So some customers update SAMQ once every year or once every 2 years or so, or if they want to do a simulation or want some specific reports that are available only in the newer versions. Let's see. Okay, questions for demos. We can arrange that. Yeah, sorry, Stefan.
Not a problem. I just wanted to tell you, you can an internal hint. You can sort of tick off the already answered questions, so you remain with the. You see that?
I didn't know that. But no.
No, not a problem. I thought so. I was actually quite surprised how much overview is still keeping. I've got one here. It says how long, maybe to help you out. How long does your SAMQ valid? So does it need to be renewed, updated on a certain time frame? I think this is a good one.
Yeah, so that's Stefan. That's the question regarding the update, which I interpreted related to the updates of the version. The tool itself has a license key which expires after the contractual period. So if you pay for the license for 1 year, the license key expires, and then the tool is not optimizing anymore. But that's a question regarding the costs and the license and so on, but renewed and updated, I would see it as a question regarding the versions, and that's updated through transports once, twice a year, depending on everybody's needs. There's one question regarding firefighters. How would that be accounted for if a firefighter executes a question? So firefighters are a bit tricky. There's a best practice, but in my experience, customers handle firefighters differently. Most have a different approach to them. So generally, most customers have a separate firefighter ID, either firefighter FF something or per department or per person. And sometimes customers set them as service users or expire them where they're not in use. Generally speaking, if you have a dialogue user that has a license and you also have a firefighter user for yourself that you only use occasionally, and then the activity of that firefighter is traced and logged and so on, then it makes sense for that user not to be licensed, as you already have a license with your dialogue user. But it depends on your setup if it's a service user, if the user is only available during use or otherwise expired or locked. So I think we need to have a bit more detailed conversations surrounding that. Right, we can arrange a demo, definitely. Okay, so we have assigned one more question regarding the T codes. Somebody who, let's say, assigned a T code to a user which changes license type from productivity to functional, but later on, let's say after a month, we revoke the T codes. So the tool would assign licenses based on the actual usage. So if the user accessed a transaction during the month it has had the authorizations to use it, then the tool will consider it relevant and would keep the license, let's say a higher category, like a functional category, which is the S4 functional user, until it's not relevant anymore. So until, let's say, 6 months later, until it's outside of the scope, and then it would downgrade the user to a lower license type. Will you show your demo? Sure, we can organize a demo. We'll reach out offline. Yeah, one more question regarding the data and the storage. Does the tool store any data, or all the data is in the customer's environment? Definitely in the customer's environment. So we do not export anything from the system or from the tool. The data is collected and saved, of course, in SAMQ specific tables in our own naming convention, but it stays in your central system like the solution manager. We don't have any connection to your own system. Everything is saved there, and it has also a period after the data gets deleted. So after a year or two, there's no more point in keeping transaction history for users from five years ago, let's say. So not to worry, nothing would leave your landscape. Okay, let's let's see if any more questions come in. And with regards to the few ones that mentioned, we can reach out offline regarding the questions for demos or the requests for demos or more details on the pricing of the tool.
Perfect. That was very lively, also partially very technical. So good that you're here. Thanks for that. Apologies if I sort of mixed up some of the questions while trying to multitask here.
No problem.
As you said, we're going to reach out to everyone individually anyway, regardless whether the questions have been answered here live or not, just to see if there is a follow-up question that may have occurred after you've answered it. And other than that, for everyone else listening, please reach out to us via labs@voquuzlabs.com or any other channel, basically via our website or even via LinkedIn. And we'll definitely try to help you out. Everything transparent and everything on a very individual basis. So for whatever you need for your system, for your company size, for your industry, we cover everything basically. Joanna, thank you very much for being here and showing so much patience in presenting and answering all the questions to the people, and see you in the next session then.
Thank you also everyone for participating. Thanks.